probably upselling it a bit too much. I'm really happy to be here today with all of you guys. It's been a couple of months since we've done one of those. We felt the time was right to go over the main things that have happened in our claims department over the last couple of months. We're already starting to look towards the holiday season, so good time to recap what happened, where we are, where we're going. So you'll hear from a couple of us today. Want to start by apologizing for the timing for those of you who are in Pacific time or Mountain time. Realize it is a bit early for you guys. We will look into timing this thing a bit better next time around. Sorry about that. And I'll also want to mention that our colleagues Chris Parr and Terry Dahl couldn't be here with us. They're both respectively in Texas and Montana. Hopefully they're going to be able to bring back great settlement negotiations, so we can call that out next quarter. With that said, and I think someone's got their mic open. It might be a room. I'm hearing a bit of background noise. We're gonna kick things off today a bit differently with a nice video that was put together about our specialty lines expertise. Michelle, over to you.
Insurance is about people, not things. Intact Insurance Specialty Solutions is a leading specialty lines insurer in 4 distinct markets: the US, Canada, the UK, and Europe. We provide a broad range of specialty insurance solutions tailored to meet the evolving needs of specific industry segments or customer groups. The breadth of our global capabilities, combined with our deep expertise in underwriting, risk control and claims, and financial strength, provides you with access to a larger team of experts, access to new markets, and a wider product and specialty solution set. You're an expert in what you do. So are we. Our US team consists of claims, underwriting, and risk control experts who have first-hand experience in accident and health, entertainment, environmental, financial and professional lines, inland and marine, ocean marine, renewable energy, specialty property, surety, technology, trade credit, and tuition reimbursement. We're driven by searching for solutions, but also specializing in prevention. We understand your pain points and strengths, and we tailor our specialty solutions to meet your unique challenges. Because after all, we're here to help people, businesses, and society prosper in good times and be resilient in bad times. Let's start something.
That's a really great professional video. We've been working pretty hard to build up our brand presence in the US. We're not, of course, as strong a brand name as in Canada, and we feel we've got a lot to contribute both to society and to insured. So our wonderful Marcom team has put in a lot of work to build it up, either through presentations like this, supporting our broker reach outs, making sure we're in the media. So hopefully you'll start seeing the Intact brand popping up a bit more here and there, and this is but a small example of all the work our wonderful Marcom team has been doing. With that, I'll turn it over to Jeff, who will give us an update on the Q3 IFC results.
Thanks, Phil. And I know it's not a competition, but I like that they mentioned claims first before anyone else in that video. And as Phil said, I'm going to go over a few highlights. I'll keep it pretty high level, but think it's good timing as we've just had earnings release and the investor call. I know many of you have dialed into that to hear it live or on a replay, so I'll try not to be too terribly repetitive and, like I said, keep it brief. Looking at this slide 5 to start, overall IFC results, and then I'll go a little bit into a couple of geography-specific things. Combined ratio over 100%, of course, is not what we want, but given it's by far the largest cat quarter we've ever had as a company, over $1 billion of cat loss just in the quarter. net of reinsurance. Pretty remarkable that the combined ratio is actually as good as that is, and that we've got a operating return on equity that's still in that 16% range, which I'd say is well within our target ROE. And investors clearly understand that we've reacted well to all of that, have the ability to price for it, and our stock price continues to do quite well even after the pre-announcement of those cats. Chris Cogdill is going to talk a bit about a couple of U.S. hurricanes when I'm done, which were small in the grand scheme of things, but interesting, I think, to get a bit of a dive into what we had to do or what we have done on that. The driver of the cat loss was Canada. 3 really big events, including flooding in Toronto and a hailstorm in the western part of the country, with a crazy number of claims that the team handled quite well from everything I've seen and heard. And a couple other things I'll mention on this slide. One is that growth is becoming a big topic, in part because the combined ratios are so good in almost every segment that we operate, be that personal lines, commercial lines, specialty lines, but also in each of our geographies, Canada, the US, UK, and Europe. And so focus naturally turns towards growth, and as you might see in the next couple slides, growth has been pretty good, actually picking back up in personal lines in Canada, but fairly low in commercial lines in each of the geographies. We certainly won't grow as a company at the sacrifice of the really good combined ratios that we're producing, but we are spending a lot of time as a company on how can we grow, how can we build better relationships with the brokers we have, where are the broker relationships that we don't have that we should within specialty lines, and I think claims has been and will continue to be a big help in that, making sure that our customers and brokers understand the deep capabilities we have, and the customer experience continues to get better and better from a great starting point. The other thing I'll mention just on the previous slide is the balance sheet, because I want to make sure people understand that as a company we're in a very strong place. The $2.6 billion of capital margin is essentially the amount of money we have above and beyond what we believe we need to support the business that we're writing, the reserves that we have, and the risk that goes with it. So I'm oversimplifying, but call it an extra $2.6 billion of capital sitting on our balance sheet that we can deploy either through growth or through an acquisition. And then the other thing that I think is important to note throughout our results the last number of quarters, prior year reserve development has been favorable pretty consistently across geographies and with an order of magnitude that's even bigger than we might expect. So those two things tell you balance sheet in a very good place. The other thing that Louis Marcotte always talks about is our debt to total capital ratio. In other words, how much debt do we have as a percentage of our total capital? And that's down to 20%, which is where we like it. And it always spikes when we do an acquisition like RSA or DLG because we issue debt to fund that acquisition. So to have it back down, along with that big capital margin and the results across our geographies being in a good place, tells you that we can absorb any unforeseen shocks pretty well in the future, like 3 giant cat losses in 1 quarter, but also tells you we have the financial flexibility to make a sizable acquisition if we find something that's attractive both from a strategic fit perspective and the price that we would have to pay. So lots of work being done there, and as always, you never know if and when something is going to happen. Flipping to the next slide then, thought I'd talk briefly about the U.S. Results were great. The combined ratio for the quarter as well as the year, solidly sub 90, which is our goal. And underneath that 87% combined ratio you see, I'll tell you that almost all of our business units are posting really good combined ratios, which is exactly what we want. There's some work being done on a few of them, and that's driving down our overall growth a bit. You see 4%, which is below plan and below what we were hoping by a couple points, but seeing lots of really good growth in the business units that we have good profitability, and we'll continue to push on both of those things, the overall profitability as well as the ramping up that growth engine. Thought I'd also spend a little time on the UK, and I know lots of people hear a little bit about the UK here and there. Obviously new to us when we acquired RSA a few years ago. We've done a lot of work trying to get that portfolio where we want it to be. As we did the acquisition, we knew that personal lines in the UK was a really hard place to perform from a profitability perspective. And we've sold that business and are in the process of making that transition happen, which is a really hard thing to do, including because lots of people are impacted by it. At the same time, we've made an acquisition of DLG's commercial lines business, and the team is working to integrate that. And just as a little sort of aside there, it's different from an integration perspective versus what we're used to in Canada, where generally speaking, the Intact business is much, much bigger than the book that we're acquiring. And so decisions like whose policy system do you use and which rates and which forms aren't real big debates, because the size of the Intact book is so much bigger that it makes sense to roll the business onto our forms, rates, systems, et cetera. And contrast that here, where the DLG book and the Intact RSA book were similar size in lots of lines. So it's a lot more work to decide which forms, rates, et cetera, make more sense. And the team's working very, very hard on that. As I'm told, the integration's ahead of schedule and going very well, which is cool to see. We really firmly believe that a commercial lines book, including specialty lines in the UK, is a place where we can do very well. An underserved market, if I can call it that, where I think increasing customer experience levels and claims sophistication and pricing sophistication are all places where we can bring something to the market that it doesn't have in the place we would like to see it, I think. And then in the spirit of trying to be fairly quick here, the next slide talks about Canada, and it hits on some of the things I mentioned. Growth, very good in personal lines. Combined ratios significantly impacted by CATs in the quarter, both commercial lines and personal lines. And I'll just mention that commercial lines in Canada includes specialty lines. And I think specialty lines continues to perform even better than commercial lines in Canada, which is good to see. And then slides 7 and 8 we included here because we've got them in the, 8 and 9, we included because they are in the pack for investors. I'm not planning to go over them other than on slide 9, I'll mention that we always separately talk about investment income. We have lots and lots and lots of money invested, given how many dollars we have in loss reserves, but also then distribution income, which is somewhat unique to Intact. Most of our competitors, big or small, don't have this line item like we do, which is a result of the retail brokers that we own in Canada through BrokerLink, as well as the MGAs that we own in Canada and in the US. So those brokers produce premium, a lot of which we write and becomes underwriting income for us. They also produce lots of distribution income. So they get paid commissions, and anything above and beyond their own expenses becomes distribution income. So $132 million of distribution income in the quarter continues to grow, and it's a big impact when investors look at us because that's a revenue and income stream that they very much like to see. So it's something we keep a close eye on, as do our investors. Lastly, I'll just mention there were a couple of questions, if you listened to the investor call, that were somewhat interesting to me from a claims perspective. One is they asked about the implementation of the new claim system in the UK, which has been, I'll say, very expensive and very long process. Interesting to me that investors have taken note of that and asked about how that's going. My understanding is they were relieved to hear Patrick say that it's in a good place now, and we're seeing some benefits from a speed and customer experience perspective, as well as efficiencies. And I'll just mention that, some of your colleagues on this call got a look into at least one of the existing UK claim systems, and it was a green screen mainframe thing, and they had multiple of those. So this is a giant leap forward to them compared to where we're at in Canada or the US with our claim system. And the other question was about social inflation, which is really a US question, and I thought Charles and Darren Godfrey answered it really well, mentioning that we've exited lots of a couple of the lines that really drove our liability inflation exposure, public entities, healthcare programs, where we have lots of bodily injury claims, which really is the portion that's driving a lot of what people call social inflation in terms of judge and jury behavior. And then they talked about how casualty is a smaller percentage of our book than most of our competitors, given how much surety, property, inland marine, and things like doer tuition reimbursement we have. But they also called out in their response how active we've been on those liability claims, exited lines or otherwise, getting claims settled really, really well, really proactively, and how much that's helping our go-forward fears about severity inflation. So interesting to me that both of those questions came, and I thought the answers were interesting as well. So I'll end my comments there, other than to say it was a very good quarter and something that I don't think any of us take for granted in this business. And it's the result of tons of little things being done really well day in, day out. And I'll thank all of you for the huge role you play in that. And with that, kick it over to Chris for some comments on Helene and Milton, including what we've done for tracking and reporting. And again, I think it's interesting to many of you, given those events were all over the news, and lots of work done on that.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff. So, hello everyone, my name is Chris Cogdill, and I'm a claims manager on the property team. And one of my responsibilities is to report on cat losses. So today I'm going to talk about what that entails and briefly touch on what we saw with Hurricanes Helene and Milton. So, as you just saw, much of Intact's overall results for Q3 were impacted by cat losses that were 17 points above expectations. And most of that cat activity was seen up in Canada, and to a lesser extent down here with Hurricanes Helene and Milton. So with Helene, we saw about 66 U.S. claims and are roughly estimating $4.2 to $7.3 million in losses for that event. And Milton thankfully turned out to have less of an impact than originally forecasted, and we've received 22 claims and estimate roughly an exposure of $1.5 to $2.5 million for that event. So that's just on claims that we've received to date. So there might be other claims out there, but that's currently what we're looking at. So when it comes to reporting, what really qualifies as a cat or a catastrophe? When we think about cat losses, the first thing that probably comes to mind are hurricanes, but really a cat is defined in the industry as any event that causes more than $25 million in damage and impacts a large number of insureds. And sorry, if we can go, yeah, that slide is great. Sorry, the first slide. And actually in the United States, majority of our cat losses come from non-hurricane cats. So typically what we call convective storms, so hail, wind, and tornado events. The organization called Property Claims Service, or PCS, declares all cats throughout the year, and each cat is assigned a numerical number. And in my role, I distribute notices of all PCS declared cats to the claims teams, business units, and claims leaders. And I'm sure many of you on this call receive these notices from me on a regular basis. So on this screen, you'll see a typical example of the cat notices that I send once those are declared by PCS. So once that cat code is added into our system, any claims that arise from that cat can then be coded and tracked in CWS, which is what I use for my reporting. So next slide, please. Throughout the year, I prepare ad hoc cat reports when there's any cat event that has the potential of having a substantial impact on our businesses. So for example, in recent weeks, I've been providing regular updates on the development of Hurricanes Helene and Milton. And as you can imagine, when these hurricanes are developing, there's a lot of eyes at the company that are looking to determine what impact that event will have on us as a business. So while we do modeling in advance, based on the direction of the storm and where our risks are located, those models only give us really a wide range of potential exposure. So there's a lot of interest from folks on what's actually happening when those hurricanes do come ashore. So in my ad hoc reporting on event specific cases, I try to give a good recap of the activity as possible, noting the number of claims that are coming in, which states are being impacted, and which business lines are impacted. And once we have information on the actual damages, I provide a rough estimate of the total losses incurred across the various business lines, which can be kind of a tricky line to walk. So, a lot of my job is to look at what's coming in, review the claim files, and provide a range of potential downside, and then try to narrow that range as we learn more. So, for example, on the outset of a hurricane, I might estimate a range of $1 million to $6 million in losses for claims for, let's say, inland marine. And then as time moves on and we develop more information, we might narrow that range down to $3 to $4 million when we get resources on the ground. And I could be totally off, and we might have development from there, but at least that a little bit more specific insight on what is developing is what a lot of our leaders are looking for when they're making business decisions and when they're getting reports from us in claims. So lastly, on a monthly basis, I prepare a summary report that goes to Jeff, Phil, and claims leadership on all current and prior accident years. And it's a fairly comprehensive report, and it includes claims specific reporting on some of our more significant exposures. So on this slide, you'll see an example of a snip from one of those reports where I'm reporting on reserve increases and really what's driving those, what drives those changes in the financials for a specific year. So lastly, what I'll say is, generally part of all of this reporting includes looking at losses that come in and trying to make sure that everything is properly coded. And I'll just say that's where you folks come in. So it makes my reporting a lot more efficient and accurate if CAT claims are coded properly. So certainly if you have CAT losses, please work with your manager, your supervisor to make sure it's coded properly in CWS. And if any of you have any questions or have issues, seeing if a code is or a CAT claim is coded properly, feel free to reach out to me at any time, and I'd be happy to assist you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. This is you really do great work at following these cats. This is something that our senior execs care a lot about. Like when hurricanes start popping up in the news, we get lots of questions because these things may have a really big impact on our financial results. And Chris and his team are always just on it, sending real-time reports, gathering information, because we also have a lot of claims in the U.S. that come from risks that were written out of the U.K. or Canada, and it's great to have a consolidated reporting on that for our execs. And there's some tricky situations, like Hurricane Helene came up with wonderful timing right at quarter end. We were about to close, and our execs, the actuaries, want to know, is this going to be a $1 million event, a $15 million event, a $150 million event? So a lot of what needs to be done, as Chris was mentioning, was taking an educated guess at how bad is this going to be, and putting in brackets, and that can be nerve-wracking, because we all like certitude. We all like saying, well, someone went on the ground, the building's a total loss, it's going to cost $12.3 million to rebuild it. The reality is we often don't have that luxury, and giving a good estimate based on your expertise. You've seen lots of other hurricanes, you've seen lots of other buildings getting torn down, or boats getting sunk in the water. Going off that feeling to say, well, I'm pretty sure it's going to be in this range, that is incredibly useful information to provide to our actuaries and to our senior leaders, and they appreciate, they understand the uncertainty that goes along with it, but giving that information, being able to give it in pretty much real time, is one of our great success stories within the claims organization. So I was really happy to have Chris join us today to talk a bit more about this, and if you've got questions about hurricanes and cats and all that fun stuff, feel free to send Chris a note. He'll be glad to talk you through it, because this is something really important, and I do think it's something we do really well. All right. Moving on to the next slide, going to talk to you a bit today about the engagement survey results. I'm going to start by calling out a watch party that I missed. I'm not sure how I missed you guys in Atlanta. You're right there on my screen. Sorry about that. Happy that you guys have got together for our town hall today. Going back, I'm going to talk to you a bit about our engagement results, and you'll have seen the email from Mike. Before we get into the results, I want to talk to you a bit about the concept of engagement at IFC, because I think it's really important that we talk about why do we do this survey, what do we do with this survey, versus just getting a number and getting a best employer tag. And because if you don't have that background, this engagement survey can seem like a check the box exercise. And that's definitely the case at some other companies. It's not the case at IFC. It is something extremely important. You would be surprised how much time our most senior leadership spends poring over the results in a level of detail that you could not imagine. Like, this is something that our most senior leaders from Charles and the board on down care a lot about. They will spend hours on it going, all right, what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better? Both looking at the data, looking at the comments, looking at the trends in the comments, because at IFC, engagement is something really important. The intent is not just to get good results for the sake of getting good results, for the sake of getting a sticker that says we're a best employer. What's important is trying to figure out what can we do to make as many people as engaged as possible, make as many people as happy, as proud to be working at IFC as possible. And there's limits to the survey. It's a snapshot at a specific point in time. We all have good days and bad days, and different people want different things at different points in time. And that's okay, but it's still something very meaningful in terms of allowing us to get a sense for what we're doing right and what we could be doing a bit better. So it is something important. I can tell you I have personally read every single one of your comments. There's a lot of them, but it's really important to get a sense, to get a feel for what everyone's putting in there, and I really appreciate the time and seriousness you've taken in filling out the survey. As you've seen from the email from Mike, the US Intact engagement is at 83%, which is up 2 points. Good news. Claims were up 5 points to 80%. Really good news. We're really happy with that. 80% is actually identical to IFC's overall North American score. So thanks everyone. Really happy to see that. And if I'm looking at the broader U.S. perspective, we're once again best employer in the U.S. We're once again a best employer in North America. And I'll call out a few numbers. We're 3 points above the U.S. best employer average. So we're not just getting in there, the last one in. We're over the best employer group. We're 8 points over the top quartile, so the top 25% average for U.S. employers, which is a lot. We're 11 points over the average U.S. insurance company, which is just a big gap, 11 points. Really happy with that. Outperformance of our competitors in the insurance industry is something fundamental. It's one of our strategic priorities at IFC. Talking a bit about, from a claims perspective, our areas of strength are fairly well aligned with the U.S. overall organization. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of our strengths. Manager support and effectiveness, always really happy to see that your managers, the people you interact with on a day-to-day, getting great scores. That's something really important. Being customer driven is also, that's an area of strength, which is something so fundamental. You know, if we're not focused on customers, if we're not all realizing how important it is to give a good customer experience, we're not going to do well as a company. So if we're engaged on the customer, always thinking of the customer first, that's going to get us to a great place. In terms of areas of opportunity, that's also fairly well aligned between claims and the U.S. organization. Work processes and technology remain an area. I would say they're still low. We'd like the score to be higher, but they are trending in the right direction. We've seen some improvement in our score. We're going to continue working hard on that. They are difficult areas. Quite frankly, they're not areas where we can just, use our magic wand and make problems go away. But we are always striving to meaningfully improve, and that doesn't necessarily mean making a major problem go away, because that's often very complicated, but it's trying to find meaningful ways to improve and make things better bit by bit. I do want to encourage everyone on the call, you are part of the solution. If there's issues, meetings that don't seem that useful, processes that seem like a waste of time, talk to your manager about it. If you've got great ideas about how we can improve things, we want to have that conversation with you. You guys are hands-on. You are going through these processes, so it's really important to hear from you. Recognition is another one I'll call out, because we are, as Mike mentioned in his email, we are getting a new recognition platform coming in soon. I think that's going to be very exciting. We've got a recognition platform in Canada that's worked really well. Excited to see how we're going to roll that out to the US. So all in all, the engagement survey is a good exercise that is helpful in allowing us to take the temperature and figuring out how we can do better. It is not a one and done by any stretch of the imagination. This is a year-long process. We'll put together action plans that are being followed closely across the company, and we want to continue to hear from you. This is not something where you fill in the box once a year in the survey and that's it. We want to hear from you. Speak to your manager, speak to any manager, send me a note, give me a call, whatever works for you. We do want to hear from you on a regular basis. And if you're interested in contributing formally to improving our engagement, working on our action plans, again, let us know. Let your manager know. We'll be glad to work with you, and we'll continue to keep you updated on what's happening in terms of engagement. If we move on to the next slide, we want to take a few minutes to call out some of our great wins as a claims organization over the last few months. And you'll see we'll be talking about a few very different areas within claims, and I'm sure that some of them, maybe most of them, will not be something that you're very familiar with, will not be something that falls on your radar day to day. And I encourage you to pay attention, even if you don't understand everything that's going on. If you want to learn more about an area, saying, hey, how does inland marine work? How does surety work? How does this part of the company work? Speak to your manager. We've got lots of people in claims who will be so happy to talk to you about how their world works and take 10 minutes to just walk you through or talk to you a bit more, whether it's about one of the cases I'm going to mention or the processes I'm going to mention today, or something in general. But curiosity is a good thing. If you've got questions, raise them and we'll be glad to talk about it. If we move to the first success story, the one priority case, this is a wonderful win from our coverage litigation group. We were involved in litigation in Louisiana, which is not the most insurer-friendly state, let's put it that way. Plaintiff fell off from scaffolding, got some really unfortunate serious injuries, ended up being paralyzed. And there was a direct action by the plaintiff against us, as well as our insured, where there was a coverage dispute. It wasn't clear in that case whether or not we had our policy covered the loss. However, the downside risk of an adverse verdict was in the $20 to $25 million range. And there was a risk that this would blow through a policy limit. And a lot of what we do in these cases is manage our risk and figure out what's the safest way for the organization to get out of this file. What we chose to do is we ended up paying our $5 million policy limits to settle the case and avoid the risk of an excess verdict. We reached an agreement with the insured to say, look, we're going to continue pursuing our coverage dispute, but it's just going to be between the insured and Intact. We're going to get the plaintiff out of the picture because they got their money. And we got the insured who had some solvency issues to keep the $5 million in escrow so we could easily access it if we want. If you've ever heard the expression pay and chase, this is an example of pay and chase. We paid the plaintiff and we're chasing our insured in a coverage dispute. So we filed the coverage lawsuit, coverage litigation group filed a motion for summary judgment. We got some really good information in the litigation process. The discovery process led us to find evidence that the broker might have been at fault, really not us. And we got a great win on the motion for summary judgment, where the court found we're entitled to have the $5 million that's being held in escrow. So effectively, we would not be paying out anything. The amount we paid out to the plaintiff, we would be getting back from our insured because there was no coverage under the policy. An appeal is still possible. We don't have the money yet, but this is a really big win. Congrats to Nick O'Connell, Sarah Menton, and Katie Downey. This was a file that our senior execs followed closely, and we were glad to share the win basically the moment we got the judgment with our senior leadership as well. This is a great win in a recovery action and a coverage dispute. Congrats to the coverage litigation group. We move to the next slide. Monridge is an environmental matter. And this is a different kind of file. It's not one we got out of without having to pay anything like the prior file, but this is something where we turned around really quickly and managed to save $3 million off our reserve. That's a big win that deserves a shout out. Even though we had to pay some money, paying the right amount of money, not having to overpay, is a huge win. What came out, it's a bit of a complicated file in the environmental group. A claim came in out of nowhere. Basically, the first we heard about it was a $9 million policy limit demand with a very short time window to decide whether or not to pay it. And if you don't agree to the policy limit demand, there's a good chance you're going to be exposed beyond policy limits, which is a big risk for the organization. What happened in this case is in 1995, our insured, Monridge, installed fuel storage tanks in an underground vault at a gas station in Pennsylvania. Many years later, the owner of the gas station was taking a shot back into the vault. That ignited some fumes and it caused a massive explosion. Unfortunately, it killed the owner of the gas station and seriously injured another worker. A really, really sad situation. We get thrown into this really complicated lawsuit where there's some complex coverage issues. We got late notice of the claim. There is a prior operations exclusion in the policy that might apply to this one. There's also some liability defenses with respect to the work that's been done by our insured and the time that elapsed since that happened. But when we're looking at the file and just really jumping into it really quickly, our downside risk might be a jury verdict of $100 million if the case went to trial. Now, obviously, we don't like to take $100 million losses. It's something we try to avoid if we want to keep great financial results. And what Marquez and Fred Smith and the environmental group did is just jumping into the file, getting counsel quickly, doing an investigation, jumping into mediation. Even though we've only heard about this file for a couple of weeks, we ended up managing to settle by only paying half of our policy limit, so only paid $4.5 million. We're able to bring in a $3 million reserve reduction. This is a really great result in a file that kind of forced everyone out of their comfort zone, something that comes in really quickly and we just need to turn on a dime. Really wonderful result at the end of the day, $3 million reserve takedown. Congratulations to the environmental team on that one. So I want to turn my attention to a different kind of big win. One priority was a coverage win. Monridge was liability coverage win. This one, I'll call it a process win. And, you know, the first two files, it might look like a big home run where it's really obvious something is happening. This one, I'll call it like winning the batting title, where you just provide sustained, really high quality work that adds up to something amazing at the end of the day. I'm allowing myself the baseball analogies because Melissa Stodonic was really heavily involved in this one. So our auto property damage team has decreased cycle time and indemnity payments massively over the last year. If you look at our heavy equipment claims, we handle a bit over 4,000 of these claims in 2024. Our average savings per claim in terms of what we pay out is $1,100. So that equals to about $4.5 million that we've saved just year over year in how we manage those claims. And if you look on the commercial auto side, about 1,500 claims, $1,200 saved per claim. That's another $1.8 million, a total savings of $6.3 million. That is a lot of money by improving how we handle files. And the good news is it's not just an improvement on our indemnity spend. Our cycle time's also really significantly gone down. So it's the time from when we set up to the claim to the last indemnity payment. 2023 was 109 days. We brought that all the way down to 69 days. Like 40 days off is something massive, really great results. And how have we done that? Well, the claims handlers are doing a great job monitoring the repairs of the vehicles, addressing extended repair time coverage as soon as the repairs have been completed. Just really making sure our processes are tight. We've also developed an internal damages team. And you probably hear us talk about internalization quite a bit. This is why we do it. Because at the end of the day, we're frankly a lot better at doing things ourselves than relying on third parties to do it. Had actually a lovely time in our Denver office a few weeks ago, meeting part of the APD team, including Drew from our damages team, and just bringing that expertise in-house is making a tremendous difference. And this shows what a great team we have. This is a team effort that just pushed in the right direction and got really meaningful results. And this is how we outperform at the end of the day. This is literally what makes Intact so great. Stuff like this is directly what leads to our wonderful financial results. So congratulations to the entire APD team. This is truly wonderful. Last but not least, a surety claim. This is a contract surety case out of Texas. So we had issued 5 bonds for projects that State Line had with the Texas Department of Transportation, highway improvements, bridge work. What had to happen happened. State Line was unable to finish those projects, ceased its operations. So we got 5 performance and payment bond claims. One of those projects, there's very little work that had been done at the time of default. And we had to figure out, what do we do now? The DOT turns to us and says, well, you're on the hook. And initially we were concerned about having to pay the penal sum under a bond. So bonds think of it as a policy limit. This is a penal sum that you have to pay if the company to which you issued the bond isn't doing the work. We didn't want to pay the penal sum loss. So what we ended up doing is really doing a deep dive on the file, and instead of paying the penal sum or doing a takeover of the project, which is often what we do in contract surety, where the project, like we become essentially the general contractor, we negotiated a tender agreement with the Department of Transportation, where we paid for the difference between the contract balance and the cost to complete the project with another contractor that the DOT likes. And that allowed us to save over $2 million in the losses, and it also provided us some cost certainty, because when you take over a project, you don't know how much it's going to cost. Here, we found a solution that made the DOT happy, and that made us happy by getting us to a great financial situation. So congratulations to the contract surety team. That was a great win. We're going to continue highlighting some of these cases. I think it's important to share this with the team. These are, and we could spend 5 hours sharing great stories, but happy to share some of our wins with you. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Cynthia, who'll talk to us about our 2025 priorities.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, if you can go to the next slide, please. We have a number of ongoing high-level projects in the claims organization, and most of these will not be new to a lot of you. You've at least heard some of them, are familiar with them. And I just want to tie back to, like, how do we get these claims priorities? Well, you heard Phil talk a little bit earlier about engagement, and one of the things that comes out of engagement is we build our action plans. And some of those things that we hear about in engagement, when we find a solution, they become our high-level initiatives. So on this list, I'll give you a couple examples. We've heard concerns from you all in past surveys about talent, that we are not attracting and retaining talent that we need in the organization. And so we have revamped our training program, and most of you are familiar with that because you've either gone through new training or you've helped participate in building new training. And that's all about making sure we have the expertise to meet our goals going forward as an organization. We've also put the trainee program in place so that we have a pipeline of folks interested in getting into claims, and we can develop and train them along the Intact way, so they're here for us to help feed our talent needs in the future. That's the kind of thing that we get from an engagement survey. Another one is we always have discussions about systems and workflows. That's kind of a consistent message in the engagement survey, and yet it's not always the same, in part because we do make changes and improvements. And you'll see some of the things that we're doing now that are in response to messages we've gotten from you in the past are texting in CWS, which is coming. It's slow, but it's coming. It takes some IT work, but it will get there. We're also exploring ways to improve the claim intake and assignment process, which is another concern that we've heard about. And one of the other things we're working on is working with the IT UX team, which is a team that helps build kind of user-friendly interfaces between the technology and the user. It also helps with some workflows, and so I think in a going forward basis, we'll start to see some of their expertise in the changes we make in our system in response to your requests, and that'll be something else that we hope will make the user experience better for you. But keep providing us the feedback, because that is one of the ways we help develop our priorities. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is here for you all, and certainly follow up if you have questions on any of the specific priorities on here, or if they're unfamiliar to you. But I think most of them are probably not too surprising, things that we've been working on at a high level for the last few years. So the other thing I want to talk about, which is the next slide, if we can go on, is to talk a little bit about outperformance, and this does tie into our high-level initiatives. It's essentially, how do the other things show up on our priority list? So things that didn't come from the engagement survey necessarily, how do they become claim priorities? And so this slide that we have up right now is the Intact roadmap. You should have seen this in the town halls. You see them when you see global specialty presentations, some of our investor presentations. This is essentially the organization's plan for how we will achieve our goals and what our goals are. And from this, we in the claims organization are then tasked with figuring out how we assist the organization in this. So we have gone through the planning phase recently, which at that time what we do as an organization is we say, okay, this is how many employees, this is what kind of resources we need in 2025, 2026, 2027 in order to meet our obligations under our policies. But then on top of that, we then also develop what are our strategic initiatives that'll help achieve the goals that are beyond just doing a great job handling claims. They're putting us at the next level. And if we can go to the next slide, this is kind of a highlight of Patrick Barbeau, who oversees claims globally in all lines for Intact, and this is sort of where he is focused within the claims organization. So you see, here's what we say the claims teams are going to try and do to contribute to the overall Intact results. Then within this, we as a claims team say, okay, what are we going to do to try and have in the United States? What are we going to do to add our own assistance to helping us reach those goals? And one of the ones I want to spend a couple minutes talking about is outperformance. Some of you have heard us talk about outperformance. Some of you may not have heard us talk about it in claims, but you've certainly heard it in the global presentations. And outperformance means essentially what the word suggests. It's like we're going to do better than the market. Intact has a goal that we are going to beat the market. And we're strategic. We don't play in every market. This is why you don't get your homeowner's insurance from Intact. because we're playing in a market, Intact plays in markets where it knows it can win. We have the expertise in the United States in specialty. That's why we choose specialty, because it's a place that we can win. And unlike other carriers who might be okay with 100% combined ratio because they can still be profitable through their investments, Intact says, no, we're gonna do better than our market in this industry. So, and what this means is that we constantly have to look at ways to do things better. So a lot of you have asked me over the past couple of months, like, hey, Cynthia, what's your new job? Well, this is my new job. I spend a lot of time thinking about talking to different people in the organization about things that we do, where we have pain points, where we have expertise we're maybe not fully utilizing, and how we can do it better. And that's what we need to do. We need to be constantly changing and growing, because if we stay the same, the market will catch up to us. We will not be outperforming, we'll be the same performing. To outperform, we have to continually improve and get better. And listen, sometimes that means we'll do things wrong too, or we won't get it right. That is okay. Just like Chris Cogdill told you earlier that he has to estimate what the cat exposure is because he doesn't know it. We will have initiatives that we take on that we think are going to knock it out of the park, and sometimes they don't. And what do we do then? We pivot and we try something else. And I'll give you an example of that. When Intact acquired us, we had a really aggressive plan for staff counsel across the United States. We were going to have multiple offices, and this was really going to be a game changer for us. And as we got into it, and also as we exited some of our lines of business, it became apparent that we would not be able to have as robust of a staff counsel program in the U.S. as we had in Canada. So what did we do? The legal team pivoted and entered the subrogation legal team and also the coverage litigation team. So we've still found another way to win, to outperform the market, but it did require adjustment. So when we move into these new areas, when we tell you we're going to try something different, know that we're watching the numbers. A lot of people are aware. We don't just one day wake up and change. A lot of people know what we're going to do, and they're watching it. And if it doesn't work, we'll change. But we think it's going to work, in part because we've looked at it a long time, and we've sought feedback from you and from other people in the industry. So here are sort of our outperformance initiatives that we are going to be rolling out. Some of them we've started a little bit. Most of them are on ramp right now, things we'll do going forward. The first one is a cycle time initiative that we'll focus on our bodily injury claims. Now, you heard Jeff talk about the investors are interested in social inflation and what it means for us. And while we have exited a lot of the businesses that for which we had exposure to social inflation, we still have some in our bodily injury teams, teams handling bodily injury claims. And so we're going to try and do something different and see if we can, aggressively move to get out of claims earlier before we have all the information that we usually seek before resolving those claims, to see if we can drive a different result. So that's one big initiative, and you'll hear more about this, but just to give you a high level right now. The next thing we're going to do is based on expertise, which we talk about a lot in specialty, is that we are experts and we have expertise, and trying to design ways to use our expertise better. We have different expertise across global specialty, and in the United States, we specifically have expertise on claims within the United States. And so many people in the organization are already helping our global partners with claims in the United States. You'll see that increase. But we will also seek the input of our global partners if we have claims in other jurisdictions or claims that have an expertise which we do not have. And so we're developing those processes to better expand and take advantage of the expertise that we have. And then if we can go to the last slide, we will continue our internalization efforts. This is something we've done for a while, and we think we have still some new things that we can do. Internalizing experts, we have some more room to internalize our coverage litigation work, pushing to limit the scope of our IAs, and then also where we do need to use external resources, we're going to be strategic about how we do it and use them in a way that really leverages their expertise in the specific matters, and also is, we're going to focus on using those vendors who provide us good outcomes, which is really what we need to be doing. So that was really just a high-level view on our outperformance initiatives. As I said, you'll hear more about them, but I'm going to pass it back to Phil in case we have a couple questions for at the end.
Thanks a lot, Cynthia. That was a great overview of our priorities for 2025. We've got 5 minutes left. Gonna throw this open to the room. Are there any questions you'd like to throw at us? We can take them offline as well. But if you've got any questions right now, we'll be happy to answer them.
Please feel free to drop them in the chat.
This is now the awkward period where we wait to see if something happens in the chat, so I'm going to try to fill some time while you type away. Thanks a lot, everyone. I'll start with the closing notes, but don't stop yourself from sending in questions. Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming in and for joining, whether virtually or in person, our town hall. I know you all have very busy jobs and a lot of workload and a lot on your plate. We do feel it's important once a quarter or so to come together as a team and chat about what we're doing. So really appreciate the time you've taken, and I hope you're taking away 1 or 2 things that make you go, huh, I didn't know we did that. I didn't know this is why we're redoing X. And again, if you've got questions, if your things you wonder about, even if it's just like, an errant thought, you go like, oh, why did we do that? Please ask those questions. We'll be glad to engage. We'll be glad to talk things through. It's important. We want everyone to understand how our very large claims organization fits together, because it is a crucial part of who we are as Intact at the end of the day, and really thankful to be part of this wonderful team and the great work that's being done. All right, I think I talked long enough to see if there were questions. Thanks a lot, everyone. Hope you can have a wonderful day. Talk to you all soon.